Good morning, everyone. So, I've thought long and hard about what to say to all of you today, because there's a lot I want to say. How closely themes of alienation and isolation from Never Let Me Go relate to the exhibition I have mounted in the art gallery, why I have called that art exhibition Spider's Soliloquy. I wanted to say something about punishment for drinking and using drugs as the wrong way to go, for it drives those behaviors underground, making it all the more dangerous. For when kept secret, it becomes impossible to identify the depression or anxiety or discomfort propelling that use in the first place. I want to say something about how important it is to do something about rising rates in teenage anxiety and depression and the accompanying rise in drinking and using drugs. How important it is to talk aloud about what ails us and to share our distress openly, and how our not doing so plays directly into the current opioid epidemic and all the young Brooks alum who are dying. I want to explore what we as a community can do and ought to do better to make the world less judgmental and fearful and more compassionate and understanding, safer for all. I wanted to talk about all those things, but in this brief talk, I don't have time to do all that justice. So instead, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to share my family story. And from that, perhaps, you'll find some meaning and some things to think about here at Brooks School. My story is really my family story, and at the heart of my family story is my daughter's story. My daughter is Elisif. I will simply share from the beginning, and all I ask is that you sit back and listen. From the earliest age, Elisif was exotic and beautiful. A beauty but restless, always on the go. She was Katniss Everdeen before there was a Katniss Everdeen. She loved the outdoors. She loved to soar. The higher, the better. She loved fun. She loved to read, always and voraciously. And she was an artist. Whatever she did, she was absorbed. This is our family in 1992. And that brings us to the guinea pig circus. Blossom on parade. We had golden years with our three beautiful daughters, and they had a golden time together. Elisif loved her sisters, and they loved her. Even as teens, different from one another, they were still sisters. Beneath the, "I don't like the way you act," and the, "Why can't you be normal?" was what could only be called love. And they kept having fun. They may not have acknowledged each other and their different cliques in the hall of school, but back at home, they were still sisters. In our family, there was an unshakable foundation of love. It needed to be there, for it was challenged by forces beyond any of us. And I had thought we were a healthy family, a thought rooted in seeing only what I wanted to see, wishful thinking, denial, and fear. Right under our noses were risk factors at work. This photograph is from a ski trip we took when Elisif was 6 years old. She kept being thirsty and drinking water all the time, and had to pee all the time, including peeing in her pants. It was when my wife brought her concerns to our pediatrician that we learned she had juvenile diabetes. Elisif made this drawing about 6 months later, her diabetes management medication. To manage your blood sugars, you have to inject the right amount of insulin every day. Too little insulin, your blood sugar level can rise too high, and you get a life-threatening condition called ketoacidosis. Too much insulin, and your blood sugar level can fall. You can grow disoriented, faint, fall into a coma, and die. From age 6 on, Elisif and all of us lived in the shadow of her mortality. How did Elisif cope with that? What she did was she shut out her feelings. At age 7, she announced she'd never cry again, and she didn't. Not when her pet dog, Hazelnut, was run over by a car and died when she was in 5th grade, and not when her grandfather suddenly and unexpectedly died when she was in 9th grade. When her sister, Sophia, shared with us in May 2009 that Elisif was addicted to drugs, and we then planned an intervention, Sophia was right that that would mark the end of her friendship with Elisif. As a 16-year-old, Sophia knew in her heart she was losing her best friend forever as the price of trying to save her best friend's life. I can't imagine a more powerful act of love. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to say something about just before Elisif became addicted to drugs. I want to say something and share something about the gap between what she felt inside and how she showed herself to be. This is a drawing Elisif made for her mom and me several years ago. It was presented to us as a guide to her emotions and expressions. I still have this posted. You can see the gap between what she shows and what she feels. In plain language, Elisif was hiding. So I'm going to play a video excerpt, and I'm going to play several more, and they are from a video that I made several years ago called Elisif's Story. The full 35-minute video version of this is on view in the art gallery, part of Spider's soliloquy. The video is made up of voices of friends, family, teachers, and caregivers, all talking about Elisif. And this first excerpt, which some of you heard previously in English classes, this first excerpt addresses Elisif early in high school.
She would have the idea, and she had exactly the right crew of kids around her. It was very clear that she was their spiritual ringleader in some way, shape, or form.
I can't imagine anyone being that person at that age. This was someone I wanted to be around forever. It was something that was so different from everything I'd ever had, just her mannerisms and her honesty. And I felt comfort in Elisif in a way that I hadn't felt in anyone else. I felt the ability to push myself further than I'd ever been pushed. I felt the ability to stop being so afraid.
Elisif was the most creative person I knew.
If she had wanted to write, she would have written. If she had wanted to study great British poets, she would have studied great British poets. If she wanted to go into advertising, if she had wanted to be a psychiatrist, if she had wanted to go be a field researcher and study snails or something like that, she probably would have gone and done any of those things. She was really bright. In terms of her promise, she totally knew what a life in the arts was. And so I think her promise wasn't just her being in that top 1% of kids. I think she'd really have understood how to do it.
There was definitely something that drove her that was a little bit different from what drove me, or from the number of times that she changed the color of her hair. I remember sitting on the floor in my bathroom in my parents' house in Roland Park and conditioning her hair with olive oil and just because it was so used up. She wanted to get the maximum out of everything. She always had that attitude of taking it just a little bit further than anyone else would. So it was always, oh God, Elisif's going to climb the tree all the way to the top, and who knows if the branches will hold her.
So at the same time that Elisif was being seen this way by her peers, here are the sorts of things Elisif was writing in her journal. I'm afraid of letting anyone know what my real problems are, of people seeing through the persona I have been building since childhood. I feel like I don't matter to people, but then I keep them at arm's length to make sure that it's true. It's funny, I can't decide if I'm depressed or not. Maybe I'm just a teenager, and angst comes with the status. 3 more. I don't think I know how to have fun anymore. I like going to parties because I can worry about different things than usual. I'm afraid of emotions. I'm afraid of caring for something because I might lose it. I haven't let anyone or anything close. I'm afraid to have goals in case I don't reach them. To those around her, Elisif seemed to have it all together, but actually she was falling apart inside. And I wonder how many people in this room fit that description. I wonder how many have some kind of uncomfortable gap between your image, who you show yourself to be, and your true self, what you really feel inside. I wonder how many of you hold back on your full selves for fear of being judged or rejected. And I wonder how many of you hide because you maybe feel inadequate in some way. One thing I don't have to wonder about, I know that anyone feeling that way doesn't like the feeling of being uncomfortable in your own skin. Elisif was uncomfortable in her own skin and could hold it together for a while, but not forever. Here's an excerpt some of you also heard in English class that gets to how she coped with her feelings.
I remember Elisif being interested in alcohol starting in middle school.
Probably too much of our relationship towards the end of high school was centered around drinking and drugs. There was something about smoking weed and going and swimming in the reservoir where you're not allowed to swim that was like, okay, now we're back to that feeling where this is exciting and new.
I felt thrown off the train as soon as I stopped moving at the pace that she was moving.
At her worst that I saw her, she was drinking in school. I saw her drunk in school. For me to see nature, outdoor, artistic Elisif hammered in the upper school commons, that was significant to me.
In 9th grade, we got together and we talked about that we should say something. We agreed to invite Elisif to lunch, but we tried to very gently, without pushing her away, tell her that we were worried about things that we'd heard that she was doing and that we wanted her to be more careful. And I think we used the word intervention and it felt very false. We all took turns saying our piece to her and then we asked her if she had anything that she wanted to say to us. And I think she said, "Thank you for talking to me." She didn't do anything to change her behavior. I don't remember the next time that I hung out with her.
By 2 years after high school graduation, addiction had taken hold. This next excerpt begins with Elisif's grandmother speaking, followed by Diana Clark, who led an intervention in 2009, right after Sophia had come to us to let us know that Elisif had become addicted to Oxycontin.
I remember Elisif being interested in
I was stunned to realize she was involved with drugs. I thought the intervention was exactly the right thing to do. Elisif was awakened and brought down, and she looked around and saw the room full of her relatives. And I was so impressed with her because she wasn't cowed. She didn't cower. She didn't break down.
She is probably the proudest person I'd ever intervened upon. She did not crumble under the weight of this personal group of people pouring out their heart and concern. She wasn't armored in a way that was ugly. She wasn't combative or in any way lashing out at people, and that wasn't Elisif in my recollection. My recollection was just that she was proud.
I was, I guess, anxious when she was at the treatment places and down in Florida, that she wasn't going to be fine just so automatically. You know, she was very critical of their methodologies, and I thought, well, that's risky if she's going to consider her own judgment superior to theirs, and probably was superior in some ways, but still a lack of willingness to really cooperate didn't bode well.
By the time this photo was taken 3 years later in early 2012, Elisif had lied to us, stolen her sister's jewelry and other personal property, taken hundreds of dollars from our bank accounts, smashed up multiple cars, manipulated us, and generally brought confusion and chaos wherever she went, rarely, if ever, taking responsibility for it. She shoplifted all the time, and she held up a convenience store at gunpoint, albeit the gun was unloaded, but the kid behind the counter was in tears as he handed her the money. Somehow, she evaded criminal consequences, and to us, her family, Elisif's behavior was simply inexplicable. We did the best we could, but we were all out of our league, Elisif especially. In late 2013, things had gone badly again. Her boyfriend was facing jail time, and she was facing homelessness. And then there was a breakthrough. Sorry.
Most often, someone is compensating for trauma and they're using the drug to kill the pain, and then the drug becomes the pain. I think she experienced her diabetes as a trauma.
I really do believe that you have to make a choice to let somebody else do your thinking for you, and a lot of people just can't.
When Elisif had her last breakdown and said that she was ready to have other people make decisions for her because her decisions had led to pain, obviously she's recognizing that she was not making decisions in her own best interest. I would see that therapeutically as her breakdown begetting a breakthrough, that she was able to surrender, which would be really a wonderful way to enter any kind of treatment.
Elisif was doing very well for 3 months in our program. She was progressing as we expected. We saw improvement in depression.
She didn't look like someone that was looking for a way out. She was very into what she was working on.
She was always thinking of other people.
She really liked to lead the morning meeting. Whenever people would get off topic or off agenda, she was instantaneously there to escort them back.
We became a lot closer through her really reaching out to help me. I was having a lot of trouble getting up in the mornings, just had this problem, and she said, I'm gonna bring you coffee every morning, and I'm gonna knock and pat on your door until you let me in, and I'm gonna sit there while you drink it in your chair, not in your bed. And she did.
When I looked through my notes, one of them said, upbeat as usual.
Her heart was huge. She would see people who were in need.
She was a bright person, a brilliant person, and just all around just a lovable person.
After a 30-day program, followed by 3 months at a healing community, Elisif was returning to herself. Her mom and I visited her in early January 2014, and for the first time in 5 years, it was Elisif. And then this.
I was walking up to the main house and saw Lori and Mary Jo and one of the other nurses just sprinting with equipment down to the lodges. I walked into the main hall and I said, is Elle here? They said no, and somehow I knew it was Elle. Mary Jo came in. I said, it's Elle, isn't it? She said, yeah. And I said, is it going to be okay? She said, just pray, baby, just pray. And I was just getting so mad, like, where's the fucking ambulance? I don't hear sirens. I should be hearing sirens. Someone needs to be here right now, and there were no sirens, and when the ambulance did arrive, the sirens weren't on. It couldn't be real. It was so fucked up and wrong, and everything unraveled.
After 3 months, deeply in recovery, Elisif relapsed. She used heroin once and died. a not uncommon story with opioid addiction. Before closing, I want to play one more excerpt. This is Elisif's friend from middle school and high school, Allison, the one who spoke earlier about trying an intervention in high school.
The first day, it was like hearing all the other moments in her life after we had gone our separate ways of, oh, this is what she's doing, and now, oh, now she's died. And it wasn't until the next day the memories started coming back and I started to sort of put it together that this was my friend. I think about her most as the person that she was when we were the closest. Which is nice in a way because I think she was really great during that time. She had a lot of really excellent qualities, but it also feels a little unfair to keep her as a child.
Allison was Elisif's friend. Here's what I want to say. Not a single person in this room wants to feel as Allison felt as she spoke to me in tears just a couple months after Elisif died. And that relates to what I want to close with. I want to try to explain what compels me to share all this with you, why I am taking this time to tell you my family's personal story, why I am willing to step into and relive my own pain. The answer is really simple. The pain I have experienced as a father and the lonely weight of pain I know Elisif felt for years. These are pains nobody, as a parent or sibling or cousin or friend or former teacher or young person, ought to have to live through. I don't want you to live through what we have lived through. If you feel alone, I want you to know you're not alone. If you feel ashamed, I want you to know there is no shame. If you're fearful of being judged, then think about how we all might find greater freedom from judgment. In sharing Elisif's story, in speaking aloud about what too often is whispered in cryptic code, in bringing you an exhibition called Spider's Soliloquy, I hope to bring you some truths. What Elisif felt is not all that unusual, but Elisif's fate need not be anyone in this room's fate. And the best bet to getting us there is for each of us to feel safe enough to speak out loud in a community of greater compassion and fewer secrets. So what are you to do? What are we to do? How can we do things better or some other way so that the 1, 2, 3, or dozen Elisifs in this room do not go down the same path she did? That, my friends, is the million-dollar question, and at least one of the questions we will explore in the community conversation this evening. As I conclude, I want to acknowledge the Student for Mental Health Club, as Ms. Perkins did before me. Lami and Emily, you're in here. Can you stand for a second? Just a sec. All right, never mind. You don't got to stand. They're all right there. They're right there giggling. These two students saw things that people were going through, people close to them, that nobody was talking about. And they started this club out of an unshakable belief that while talking about it is not the solution, it's definitely part of the solution. And that is why I have partnered with them in presenting this evening's event called Art, Words, and More, a community conversation. A whole bunch of students and a couple of faculty will present original video, dance, music, spoken word, and other performance, all addressing this phenomenon of discomfort in your skin. whether they feel it themselves as presenters or see it in someone they care about. This is an act of bold courage to step into this conversation, and I applaud each of the participants in this evening's event. And I really look forward to springing from their presentations to facilitating a conversation with this community centered on the question, how can we as a community support those feeling separated from us? Or put another way, what can we do to support the Ellisifs in our midst? I look forward to seeing you tonight and invite you to add your voice to the conversation. Take it from me, it's a matter of life and death. Thank you.